So it was suggested to me that I talk about the ism in alcoholism. And so, first of all, I guess what I would say about that is that that's really the operational definition of the disease of alcoholism. Most people think that when they think of alcoholism, they think of daily drinking, they think of bad actions and you know sleeping on the street, bar fights, domestic violence, all of that stuff. And it's not that many of those things aren't a part of a disease, but those are the outward behaviors of an inside way of thinking that leads to them. And that way of thinking is supported by the whatever substance the person is using, whether it's alcohol or whether it's other drugs. Because what happens really is that, and I tell people this in treatment all the time. You don't start off with that kind of behavior and that kind of thinking. Most people, and I don't want to generalize, but most people start off with, basic human goodness, kindness, a conscience. But what happens is that the substance, which may initially be used for recreational purposes and then later maybe for relief from difficulties, emotional pain, et cetera, begins to do what I call round the corners, where it becomes easier to do certain things because they can be justified, or if you're under the influence, you don't care as much, so you don't feel the consequences as much. You don't think about the consequences as much. It affects the way you perceive the actions that you're taking. And what happens is that ability to rationalize bad behavior becomes easier, even though it might not feel right at first. Maybe there's a maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't lie about that. Maybe I should, Later it becomes, the longer it goes on, the more hardened it becomes, so that not only do the outside world not recognize the person anymore, they've become somebody that they weren't, the addict or the alcoholic, but the person themselves loses track of who they were. So they don't recognize the ism, and that's called denial. They don't recognize that they're rationalizing their behavior, and then that's where it becomes increasingly dangerous, because they don't recognize the rationalizations, but they still have that vague sense of something's wrong, that wasn't me, the regrets, that emptiness, the feeling of being alone, the feeling of being different, and then the bad feelings, the internal feelings, then start to get externalized or blamed on other people, and that can become aggressive, or that creates an angry defensive wall. And so now we have, little by little, we've got the justifications for bad behavior. We've got a deepening of those justifications. Then we've got self-righteous anger and a wall, an expanding, and the wall is increasing in size and depth to protect that dishonesty with self that that comes along with this whole package. So that's really, what at least in I guess we'll call it chapter 1, or we'll call it the initial episode of the description of ism, of alcoholism, of the ism part of the alcoholism, a beginning of the description of what that be like. And I have what that would look like, and I can be a lot more descriptive with you and with the listeners there, as I could tell you some stories about how, of different people and their experiences with the ism, their struggle with the ism, and in many respects, many people, my take on it is, the stories I want to tell you are the ones about how people have recognized, have come to, they've seen the light, they've had the moment, whatever you want to say, and they've done the work to address the ism. And so that's what I want to tell you about.